but I don't think that helps the analysis. There's a lot of people caught in this sort of strange time warp that if you remind them that Walter Cronkite, the so-called most trusted man in America, was a hardcore leftist, and how much more proof do you need when he called the Tet Offensive a loss when it was actually a victory? I mean, you can't get much more flagrant than that.
No, and I think there was none other than historian Douglas Brinkley, his main biographer, who kind of let the cat out of the bag on that one. I mean,
yeah,
he was, and yeah, I mean, back then, 1960s and into the 70s and even 80s, you had the source of information with just three major networks. They all basically were the same. They were all left of center. And the major newspapers, which were also mostly left of center. And you'd have some competition. Like in Boston, you had the Boston Globe, and you also had the Herald, which was a little competition. But
a little more conservative.
Yeah, that's right. Just a slightly more. But for the most part, they controlled the high ground of the narrative. And now you had the internet, and there was all this hope that conservative opinion and alternative opinions would be heard. So it doesn't surprise me that they're moving in to crack down on that. And I remember early on in the development of the internet, this was like in 1999, 2000, Hillary Clinton, I think, who was first lady at the time, came out with some statements about the need to regulate the internet, and to decide, what should be going over it. And I remember at the time, everybody's, oh no, that will never happen, But I was thinking, I think it probably ultimately will happen, given the level of power that these people have, and the fact that they will not allow for a genuine free expression of ideas. And so that's where we are now. And the new administration is obviously completely on board with it. Biden, I didn't hear the inaugural speech. Did you hear it?
No, I couldn't quite bring myself to.
Well, I caught some of it. And the little part that I heard, he already said right out there that we're going to go after, quote unquote, domestic terrorists and
well, there you
supremacists. And so, there it is. This is what we're looking at. And, this is, they're using the Capitol incursion as the American version of the Reichstag fire, as I've said.
How much of this domestic terrorist thing is going to be sort of false flag?
I think most of it is.
Are they going to do this typical situation where you'd have a local Ku Klux Klan group where 80% of the members were actually FBI undercover agents?
Exactly.
And to stir up some controversy and so on.
Totally. I mean, I think I would argue that is probably what the whole Capitol thing was. And I think that as there is investigation, that's trickling out. And yet they use that as an excuse not only to impeach President Trump, but they're going to continue. That's like a gift. I mean, they're going to continue to bang that over our heads. And, it's sort of like what Rahm Emanuel said on the Sunday talk show right after Obama became president. You cannot let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
And that's what this is. That's what we're looking at. The Reichstag fire in Germany took place a few weeks after the Nazis were elected, and Hitler used that as an excuse to suspend the German Constitution. Now, I don't think we're going to go that far in the literal sense, but in the de facto sense, they very well may. This is going to be, they have an enemy. They've claimed who that is, and they're going to, if they don't pull someone out from under a rock somewhere as proof, they'll make it up.
Yeah, well, how far do you think it's going to go? I mean, at what point, if any, are people going to wake up? I mean, how much of this crap?
Well, no, I actually think that I'm somewhat optimistic about this, as I mentioned. I mean, I think that, Biden knows that the country is at least divided, if not that he lost. And I think he knows it. And so don't the people in power, because they're the ones who pulled this off. And because of that, and because of the upcoming midterms, I think they want to succeed, and they know that in order to succeed, they're going to have to leave in place President Trump's policies because they are successful, and that they're not going to be able to go with too big a stick at people.
Well, won't this cause a revolt by the more left-wing aspects of the Democratic Party?
Well, I think they're going to probably throw them a few bouquets. They're going to kind of do a few cosmetic things. It's kind of the way, in a way, some of the socialists worked in Western Europe, like Mitterrand or some of those people. They were, on the paper, they were socialists, and they might genuflect a little bit for them and do a few things. But for the most part, they kept the country moving as a capitalist country, and they kept, they were conservative in terms of their actual governing. And I think that at least for the first 2 years, maybe I'm being optimistic, but I think that Biden will do that because they want to succeed and they want to see that their gains become stronger. And if and when that happens, then all hell breaks loose. I mean, in 2 years from now, if they win.
Well, I mean, the other argument though is that you have some real fire breathers who may start an impeachment movement within their own party, because now impeachment is done at the drop of a hat.
Oh yeah, it's become like strictly a political football now. They can impeach. In fact, there's already a congresswoman from Georgia. Her name escapes me right now, a Republican, who's going to be filing an article of impeachment against Biden tomorrow.
Yeah.
For the Burisma oil, the withholding aid until, son of a bitch, they fired him. He did this on tape. I mean, he did on tape at a speech at the Council on Foreign Relations exactly what they falsely accused Trump of doing in Ukraine. And, I don't know if that's going to go anywhere, but if it's filed and if it leads to any kind of an investigation, I think that could be very serious. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be constant impeachments. It's just that's what they have. Those are the seeds they sowed, and that's what they're going to reap.
Well, isn't it sad that the entire system was based on goodwill to some extent?
Sure.
And now it's being undermined, just like sort of anything else. I mean, the idea behind contract law is that if you have a contract with someone, it's fundamentally based on the goodwill between the parties. Right. Obviously, if something goes wrong, you'll litigate it. But the idea is that at least fundamentally, you were supposed to start off on some positive note. But on the other hand, if you go into it knowing that you're going to screw the other guy, then that really undermines the whole basis, going back to the impeachment thing, of constitutional government. If you're going to constantly pull.
No, our entire system is based on goodwill. I mean, our entire currency, our economic system, the value of the dollar is based on the trust of the American people in the American country, in our country. The good faith and credit, as they say, of the American dollar. It's very psychological. I mean, there's nothing real. It's not even backed by gold or any tangible assets. It's all based upon the good faith and credit of the American people and their faith in their government. That's the only reason why the dollar functions. And that's, as you say, that's why contracts function. There is a suspension of, each side compromises, they come up with an agreement, and they move forward based on good faith.
So taking the contract as an example.
Yeah.
What would happen to contract law if you decided to sue at the drop of a hat for every little thing? If your payment terms,
that's what they did for 4 years, and that's exactly. It's a great point.
If your payment terms were 30 days, and the guy paid you in 31 days, and you decide I'm going to sue him, and it's, think what this could mean.
It's a great insight. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's very disturbing.
And that's what they did to Trump. Every little turn, every little comment, every little nod. I mean, I can relate to it. Look, when I ran for office myself in 2004 for Congress, I remember going to an editorial board meeting, at a newspaper in my district that was completely hostile to me, waiting to get something on me. And I was there with my campaign manager, and you just sat there. I mean, even to like make a small sound, like if you made a little grunt, they would be there recording it. And it was every single question. It's like I'd have to whisper. We'd have to have a little conference, okay. And then we come back to, I mean, it was that brutal. It was absolutely no trust in the room at all. They were out to get me, and they were open about it. And that's the atmosphere that Trump existed in for 4 years.
Okay, but what motivated that? I mean, obviously they were for Barney Frank, but is that all they had against you? Is you were the other guy?
They wanted to make sure that Barney Frank was reelected, and they just wanted to completely not take any chances and wipe me out as somebody who would dare to challenge him. I had people even say that to me. I remember I was out gathering signatures, and this guy says, "Well, I don't agree with you," and I said, "Well, fine. Don't you want to see an election where you have two sides on a ballot and there's a debate?" And he says, "No, I don't. I don't want anyone to oppose Barney Frank. I don't want you on the ballot. I'm going to work to make sure you don't get on the ballot."
What was the appeal of Barney Frank, by the way?
Well, he was kind of a cult figure. He was a hero of the left. I think the fact that he was openly gay was something that enhanced his cult appeal. My election would happen to be the year that Massachusetts declared gay marriage legal, and even though that wasn't a federal issue, and I kept pointing that out to people, that's all people wanted to talk about. What was my position on gay marriage? There was no other issue, and he was seen as the kind of the vanguard of that movement. So, plus he had, he was a cult personality. The Boston Globe had built him up, just like they had built up Michael Dukakis.
Yeah,
that's how the left plays. They build these people up as these with hero worship. They keep writing about how brilliant they are. They're so brilliant. And people, and they control the high ground of our culture and our media. So they are able to do that. So they did not want someone to come along and ask any hard questions or challenge him. So they had to demonize me, and did. But anyway, and that wasn't too difficult.
But you're better for the experience now.
Yeah,
you're a hardened warrior.
They looked at everything I'd ever written, and some of the things I had written were not necessarily, things that I necessarily agreed with at the time. And that's politics. It's not beanbag, as they say. It's a tough game. So
okay, but besides waiting for 2022, what should the good guys do now?
Well, I mean, I think we have to continue to come up and out and expose the voter fraud and not give up on that. We have to call for a national ID. We should note that in October, Pelosi's Congress recommended a $1.5 trillion stimulus package, allegedly to help businesses deal with the COVID-19 crisis, even though there was very little in there for that. But one of the items in that package was, I think it was at least like $10 billion for election reform. Now, what does that mean? I mean, it's payoffs to their friends, helping them steal elections. But putting that aside, if they can put up that kind of money or advocate that kind of money to help reform our election system, then they could put up a fraction of that to ensure that every American can get access to a free and easy ID card to show that they are who they are when they vote. And, I talked about this in the first hour with Donald Jeffries, and I'm going to reiterate it now. The reason why they didn't get a national ID card or even, run by the states for voter ID was because there was this phony turf, group funded by George Soros called the Brennan Institute. It was made up of left-wing lawyers who dressed very conservatively, and they put on gray suits, and they spoke in home. and it was completely phony. And they came up with a paper illustrating with very phony, research that to have voter ID meant you were racist. It is something against.
Oh, of course.
And it was completely false. And yet they were able to pull it off, and it became a mantra. And it's actually a very racist mantra. What are they saying? That a black person can't get a voter ID? I mean, everyone can get ID. You can get ID to buy groceries. You have to have an ID to buy booze. You have to have ID to buy a lottery ticket. We all need ID to get through, any kind of, most transactions, you often need to have in the course of life an ID, and that includes everyone. So the idea that a black person can't get an ID is false and ridiculous. And I would suggest that to further show the lie of that, the ID should be free. There very well may have been some states that were charging a lot of money for it. I don't know, but it should be free and it should be easy to get. And so between that and getting rid of the electronic machines and ensuring that the vote, that the states legislators reassume and assert their constitutional prerogative to make voter laws, which was completely subverted under the guise of the COVID-19 virus by the so-called swing states, where you had governors and judges and even bureaucrats making up laws right before the election and even after the election, all to favor Biden and to weaken ID. You have legislators making the laws. You have, when the vote is counted, people at the table on both sides. You have the media there. Everything is done out in the open. Everything is observed. You have the states purging their voter lists of people who either had passed away or who were no longer in the state. We know that in Nevada, there was a lot of corruption around that. And I think in Arizona too, where you had people voting from the grave. People like to make a joke about that, but that is an issue. It doesn't take brain surgery to have a team of people in a state double checking the voter rolls. It's not that difficult. They exist. You just call someone up. You have some kind of a means to confirm that this registered person is the same person that's on the voter rolls. This isn't, in Georgia, for example, there were two counties that wanted to do this. They wanted to get rid of all the names on their voter lists who were either had passed away or who left the state. And they were prevented from doing so by a federal judge who happens to be Stacey Abrams' sister.
Yeah.
And so, this is corrupt. You have to have, these are basics. So we can then get back to an idea that was very championed back in the 1960s by the civil rights movement and was supposed to be enhanced by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was signed by Lyndon Johnson. And that is to adhere to and enhance the principle of one man, one vote, and not anything else. So we have to get back to that. So that's the big cause, I think, one of the big causes that I'm going to be focusing on this year.
I think it's a good idea, but the trouble is that there's such a corrupt infrastructure. And I think it's, at the end of the day, based primarily on not having term limits. Look at what happened to Mitch McConnell, for God's sake, who's now a proponent of impeachment. There are very few guys left standing who are still pro-Trump because they're going along with the establishment. And the whole notion that this all disappears, maybe not amongst the 75 million people who voted for Trump, but certainly within establishment government, is just appalling to me. That you could name Jim Jordan and Marjorie Greene and a few other people, but everybody else has folded. And it's so disheartening. There's newspaper columnists that have folded, that were pro-Trump, but now I guess they realize what's.
They still want to keep. They want to keep a job. They want to get invited to the talkies. Everybody jumped ship. toward the end because they want to have a future. It is disgusting, but that's what's happened. And as far as term limits, I don't know. I'm of mixed mind on that. I tend to lean toward it at this point. I didn't used to be, but I think you make the good point, Mike, in that when you're in office for that long and you keep perpetrating your position of staying in office,
right,
you become beholden to all these special interests and these lobbyists who keep you in office by giving you money so you can constantly be running again. And that maybe it would be and by the way, the Congress gave itself incredible perks if you stay in office. If you get to the magic number of serving 3 terms,
right,
you are vested for life. I mean, you get, a full pension and you get full health benefits and full this, full that, it's like you're set for the rest of your life. That, getting rid of that would be, probably good because then you can have new people come up every 2 years and you'd have people stepping down and giving someone else a chance. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a good development. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are other things that maybe are not good with that because if someone stays in long enough, they can get influence that can help your state and your district. There's nothing wrong with that. So it's a complicated question.
Right, but I think that's the exception rather than the rule. And I've known specific members, I may have mentioned this, that finally quit in disgust after a couple of terms. Scott Riggle of Virginia, the southern part of Virginia. I worked with him on Chinese drywall, and he just got so tired of the BS that he just didn't run. I believe it was the 3rd or the 4th time, and he felt it was just better to go back into the private sector. And you have to ask the question. You look at the so-called good guys like Jim Jordan. What's the motivation to be surrounded by a brood of vipers? Is it just so you can somehow egotistically say you're the good guy? Would you want to be in a situation where 95% of the people were trash, but you could go home every night and tell your wife, I'm the good guy in that group?
I think there's a lot to be said for like keeping the thing moving and bringing in regular people. And, it kind of would probably reduce the power of the lobbyists because, it would, in a sense, you'd have people who actually, if there was more of a turnover, you would have people who didn't necessarily have a big name.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I've tried to encourage people to do also, and I will continue to in these times, because one of the lessons we learned from this is that state legislators have a lot more power than they think they have. They are the elected body of the people. That is where law is supposed to be made, not by governors, not by judges, not by bureaucrats, not by unelected officials, which has been the trend since Wilson. And that I would urge people listening to this program to run for their local, state, rep, or Senate office. You may find that whoever's holding that office has been there for decades and never had any opposition. It's time to get in there. And in these districts are small enough. I mean, usually a state rep district is maybe 1 or 2 towns.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have a lot of money to do it. You don't have to get a lot of signatures to get on the ballot. It's usually maybe 100 signatures. And you can win by going door to door. And you can win by using free media like cable television in your community and Facebook and all these social networks. And you can start to go out and meet people. This is something that I've urged. If you're a housewife, if you're an empty nester, your kids are off to college and you have some time, you're retired, if you have any extra time, if you're a teenager, you can do it and you can win. And even if you don't win, you're going to get interviewed by the local press and you're going to be able to talk about a couple of issues that you care about and you're going to bring them up in a way that could make a big difference. I mean, look, I did this myself. So, I mean, I'm speaking for experience, and I'll point to the great book written by Tip O'Neill of Massachusetts. he, all politics is local. And he talked about how in the 1950s, he ran for Congress in Somerville and Cambridge. He was not well known. He was opposed by the Kennedys, who had all the political power in the state. They didn't like him. And we all love and hate the Kennedys in Massachusetts, but back then they had a powerful machine. I mean, John Kennedy was senator, and he did it by going door to door, and it took him about a year. But he actually every day he would put time aside and he would knock on doors in each and every neighborhood in that district. And by the way, he was not a man of great health either. He was very overweight, but he was able to do it and he won. And that's how you do it. It can be done by anyone on a shoestring. You don't need a lot of money. These are small towns.
Okay, but are you conflating the local congressional district with the local, I don't know what you call it in Massachusetts, the equivalent of our House of Delegates in Virginia?
Yeah, the House of Delegates, the House of Burgesses, I think they call that in Virginia.
No, that with Patrick Henry, but
okay.
No, now it's
House of Delegates.
The House of
Delegates, the state legislature. And
you're exactly right, because the guy that represents my area has been in for something like 210 years.
Michael, why don't you run?
Why don't I run?
Yes. Why don't you run for state rep in your district? Run against him. You could do it.
The district is overwhelmingly Democrat.
Doesn't matter. You can, anybody can do it. Even if you don't win, you will be interviewed by the press. You should, look, let's talk about this because I could use you as a template for anyone who's listening.
All right.
You you simply file with your local Republican Party, or you can go as an independent.
Yeah.
And then you get a status where you can start to raise funds. You don't have to do a lot. We're not talking about a lot of money here. We're talking about, I think the average state rep, state Senate run, it might cost maybe at most $20,000.
Yeah.
You basically bring in a media person maybe to help, and you start to go door to door. You start to send out press releases, which you could write yourself. You go to the cable station. If you can't get on someone else's show, you simply sign a one-page document requesting your own show. You go on cable. You host the show once a week where you talk about issues, maybe interview people. That'll give you some recognition because they run that show. By the way, cable is one of the great secrets of political life, and I did it, by the way, and it was very effective in that you do once a week, you do like a half hour or an hour show, and they keep rerunning it all week because they need content. Yeah. So after maybe a month or two of that, everyone in that town is going to know who you are because everyone will have seen it. And you set up a Facebook page, a Twitter account, all that.
Right, but I mean, in your case, you ran for federal office.
Right.
Presumably because you felt that there were bigger issues.
Right. I was interested in national issues.
Yeah, and then worrying about what streets are going to be paved in Brookline.
Right. That's right. Whatever. That's right. But look, I mean, you have to start somewhere. There are state issues that are interesting. I mean, I think Virginia, don't they have? I mean, in Massachusetts, they just passed a law that enhances abortion to the point where they're talking about the after the birth.
Yeah.
I mean, why Massachusetts needed a new abortion law at this time? All of a sudden, there's this urgency to it. I mean, we've had legal abortion in Massachusetts since Roe versus Wade. I mean, it's not like suddenly. The point is that could be an issue. There are other issues.
In fact, Virginia is going much more liberal with the gun laws.
Even if they're liberals, you could ask people, go door to door and say, look, is this something you actually believe in?
Yeah.
You'll find that liberals, your average person may not. They may take a second look. You've got a hardcore liberal, but people can be influenced. And even if you don't win, you're going to get interviewed by the local press and you're going to be able to discuss these issues and it will make a difference. People will think about it. It'll bring a shine of light.
In the case of the local district here, you could have a big argument. This guy's been in office for 100 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You take a look at his record, do an analysis. You could go do some research at the state, look at how his voting record looks. I did it with Barney Frank. Of course, after I did it, it's interesting. The Congress made it more difficult to look at people's records. I don't think it was because of me, but there's a couple of people that did this. But you can look at his record and find some real whoppers in there in terms of stuff he voted for or against. Bring that up. That's politics. But even if generally my advice to anyone listening who's thinking of doing this, you have one or two, maybe at most 3 issues. No more. Keep it very simple and keep pounding away at those issues and keep going out and meeting people face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and ask them what's on their minds. It's an incredible experience. And you'll find that there'll be housewives who will be willing to host a little coffee party for you where you'll bring neighbors in and you'll make a little speech, raise a little money, build the organization. And, it's a great thing to do if you have some time. It takes about a year and, it is very winnable. It's something that, if you're careful about how to go about it, you can do it. And you're not going to get likely, the big guns to come down heavy on you because it's not a big race.
Yeah.
These are local races. You're not going to have, the left wing come in and start to do a deep investigation on you because they're not paying attention. It's a local thing. I mean, look, if there's something, a good idea, I just should say this, is that if you're nervous about something coming out about you, whether it be in your business life or your personal life, then it's, something that some people do is it's not a bad idea. You actually hire a private investigator to investigate yourself.
Yeah.
And find out if anything that you may not want to be known is out there. I mean, look, it's an ugly business and that's just the way it is. And then once you get a full report on yourself, then you can figure out whether or not it's worth it or if these are things that you can answer to or whatnot. But, it's not a bad idea to know this. I mean, I kind of knew going in, stuff like that. So, whatever. I mean,
well, devil's advocate, though, you never ran again.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's a complicated question.
Yeah.
And that's something that, I'm not prepared to even discuss. And then
right. I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, but there were things that happened that were really unpleasant during that election to me personally and to me professionally that I don't.
Well, this is one reason why people may not want to do it.
Yeah, but what I would say to that is that, I took on a very big apple. I mean, I went to a national race. I had never had any experience. And I took on an icon, somebody who is revered nationally. So that's not what we're talking about here. I'm not suggesting people do that. I'm saying do a local race, local state rep, state senate.
But here's the point.
And you're not going to get that kind of attention.
Right. Who's my local congressional guy? Is Jerry Connolly.
Okay.
He's a lefty. He was with the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors before. But here again, maybe he doesn't have the charisma of Barney Frank, but the argument is, hey, this guy has been in office. He's known. Why should we get this guy out for you? So the incumbency is often a big advantage for these people.
Can be.
Even if they don't have any charisma. And believe me, Connolly has no charisma.
Has he had any serious opposition?
No.
Well,
because you're in a district that's
then you draw him in and you
95% Democrat.
Fine. You draw him in. You ask for debate. You get the media to ask him to debate you. You get him to talk to you publicly. You get him to respond to you publicly. And if he doesn't, then you just keep the pressure on by contacting people locally and building your base. And eventually he's going to have to pay attention. And once he does, then you have a real race. I mean, look, Barney Frank immediately paid attention to me. And we had, and that put me on the path. I mean, that's, so, you kind of bring him into like the arena of debate. And
here's what happens in this district. okay, the local Republican Party will put up some, it's always the same resume. Some business guy, preferably slightly ethnic, who's been doing some local business for 20 years. And he's going to take this business acumen and bring it to Congress.
Sure.
And it's sort of the same template. But I think it might even be purposeful, is they don't want to find anybody with charisma. They want to find some dull, boring guy with nothing in their past.
Yeah, they want a rubber stamp. They want to have somebody that's just going to be like a Manchurian candidate. I mean, that is the typical. Look at Biden. I mean, they want to have somebody that, oftentimes, I mean, when you get to that level, you have someone who, frankly, can be blackmailed.
Yeah.
There's skeletons in the closet, and they were very ambitious, and they cut a few corners to get where they are. And thus they are controlled. That's why they hated Trump. Everything about Trump, including the ugly stuff, was all out there, and he wasn't beholden to anybody. He didn't need any money. He was rich. He didn't have to, he wasn't trying to grab a few bucks on the side. It's like they weren't able to control him. So they couldn't, he couldn't be managed. But most of these people have something like that. Not so much on the local level. Again, we're talking local politics. I
don't know. Sometimes I think the only way you're going to break this is if you have a Trump-like character who runs as an independent and somehow builds his own organization. So now you're really giving the middle finger to both big parties.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Trump did change politics. I mean, he did show.
Just imagine what would happen if an independent won the presidency.
Look, if I had known about Trump when I ran, and if there was a Trump-like figure, I would have done things differently.
Yeah.
But I was locked into the way things were done,
of course,
at that time. But the thing is that nowadays, with Trump having changed the way things are and the way we communicate, you don't have to be constrained by these kind of niceties. You can go out and speak your mind and be blunt and talk about issues that you care about. And it doesn't take much. You can win on a shoestring. People have won elections with no money just because they went out, they brought up a few issues that people connected with. They said, yeah, I agree with that. And then in the quiet secrecy of the voting booth, they vote for you.
It was this guy, I don't remember his name, in North Carolina, lieutenant governor, I think, who ran he was in the Republican Party, but he was some unknown guy. And he was up against quite a bit of opposition, and he won.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Look at Sandy Cortez. She was a nobody, and she won against one of the biggest Democrat incumbents. And she did this. Look, I don't like her politics, but she went out and she met people, and she worked the streets, and had the little coffee clutches, and built a base, and didn't do. I don't think she had a lot of money behind her. She resonated because she connected with people on the far left, and they went out and they voted. So,
that was people on the far left, and she had this ethnicity.
Right. So fine. She played the race card. Whatever it is. I mean, in your case, I mean, you take a look at the conditions of your small district. What do people care about? You could do a little canvassing, do some polling, find out, what are some issues that people actually are thinking about in your district? Do a little research, maybe do some meetings with people, just do some studying and find out and then you distill a handful of issues, 2 or 3, no more, and go for it.
Yeah. In Northern Virginia, you have some unique problems because this is the home of all the Beltway bandits. So there's a large number of people,
government employees,
who are tied into the government.
Yeah.
It turns out it's even more so in across the river in Maryland, Prince George's County.
Sure.
Where some humongous percentage of those people work for the government, much higher than in Fairfield.
Well, you're probably not going to reach those people, and in a sense, when you run, you have to kind of, while you don't want to alienate anyone, you have to kind of take a look at what is going to be your base and focus on them, and not put a lot of energy into trying to convince, government swamp rats to vote for you, because they ain't going to do it. It's like it's an exercise in futility. It's like I told conservatives to not waste their time with the Jewish vote, because they're not going to vote for you. You could be, if you were Adolf Hitler and you were in the Democratic Party, the Jews would vote for you. Why waste your time? And that's a real.
Oh, by the way, that's how Henry Waxman stayed in office for 30-something years. The Republicans never put up a candidate against him. Yeah. And in fact, there was one case, I don't remember the name of the guy, who on his own was so tired of Waxman being the representative that he self-funded a campaign, and he ended up getting 20-something% of the vote, just as some Johnny doorknob guy no one's ever heard of. So you would think, well, wait a minute, if that guy had some money behind him, he may have done something. But there you go. So
people have weird ways of staying in office. There's a legendary Francis Donovan of Massachusetts who stayed in office for 20 years, didn't do a damn thing, but he did it because every day he would take orders from his constituents for Jordan Marsh blueberry muffins. And he would go to the State House, go to Jordan Marsh, he'd buy the blueberry muffins and bring them back, and he would deliver them. And people loved him for that. I'm just, it's like.
How many muffins did he have to get?
He'd probably different amounts every day. He'd bring them regularly. I don't know the details, but I know that he did this, and he ingratiated himself with his district that way. So people have.
So what? He just retired or died or something?
No, he just retired. I think after 20 years. I probably died in office. I don't know. This is in the 60s. Jordan Marsh no longer exists. Although they say that there is a company that has the secret recipe for the muffins. So the point is that muffins. What?
It was just muffins.
Oh, they were great muffins. No, the blueberry muffins, they were legendary.
Better than the pewter pot?
Yeah. There was something about
it.
You
remember the pewter pot?
Of course, well, the pewter pot was very popular with Catholics after Mass. They would mob into the pewter pot.
Yeah. Whatever happened to that chain? I remember when I was a student in Boston many, many years ago.
Mug and Muffin was another one. They were all gone. That's like a bygone era.
Oh man. I remember that. I lived in the North End.
They used to fry they would take the blueberry muffins and they would fry them on the grill. It was really good with butter. It's, probably everybody who had that regularly is dead now. It's not exactly healthy, but
the memory was, I lived in the North End that year. I remember the winter was very cold and severe.
Yeah. And
a couple of us guys would walk across Beacon Hill, Boylston Street, and we'd be cold as can be, then we'd get into the pewter pot. This hot coffee and that hot muffin, and boy, this was great.
Oh, it was part of the culture. I think they're all gone now.
Oh.
It's all been replaced by Starbucks.
Yeah.
They charge you $5 for like basically a cup of sugar water.
Well, I have to tell you a Starbucks story. This surprised even me, and I'm a world-class cynic, right? At my gym in the same center, and of course in Virginia, the gyms are open. Thank you very much.
Thanks to the government, right?
Yeah. Well, they didn't want a mass riot, so.
Sure.
All right. So anyway, the typical thing would be you do your workout, go down to Starbucks, which is right there, and get whatever you get. And then for whatever reason, they closed that location. Boom. All right. Across the way is a Panera Bread.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out they have a better deal. I'm not trying to do a commercial for them.
No, not at all. I like Panera.
But the better deal was for $9 a month, you have a coffee subscription unlimited.
Wow.
So do the math. You go to Starbucks, $2.50 each. Okay. So I thought, well, this is crazy. Mm-hmm. All the Starbucks people are going to go right over to Panera Bread, right?
Sure.
No.
They didn't do it.
No. They found another Starbucks.
I know there's something about Starbucks. I don't know what they put in that stuff, but I mean, I like Starbucks.
Yeah.
I mean, I stopped drinking the sugar drinks because my daughter basically said, if you stop drinking those drinks, you're going to lose a lot of weight. And I did.
Oh,
So she was right, because if you have the sugar in the drink, it goes right. It completely turns into fat. At least if you have like a muffin, you're having food with the sugar, so it has to digest. But if you drink the sugar in a drink, it's total fattening.
that's right.
So she's
By
right.
the way, is your daughter ever going to be on the show?
Never.
Oh.
We're talking about very private people.
Okay.
That in fact, they don't want to have anything to do with it.
All right.
Anyway, but Mike, we should have you run for office. It could be a great experiment.
Yeah, the stress may be too much. I don't know.
You'll love it. You'll have a great time. It's exhilarating. I mean, especially for a local office, because it's not a lot of controversy. You're not going to have anybody gunning for you. Not likely. You'll just be there going a little under the radar, bringing up your issues, taking on the guy, and you might win, and you could very well win.
Well, I mean,
You'd be
to be honest
surprised.
with you, I wonder if I'd have the energy at this point.
You'll find the whole experience to be very energizing. And if you win, then you can go to the State House and start to say, look, let's reassert our powers as a state legislature, and start to take back our ability to regulate things like elections and a lot of other stuff that's been usurped by the governor and by judges and by everyone else.
Well, certainly food for thought.
Do it.
I would try to find a clone of myself who's someone younger.
No, you're right. You're just the right age. You need someone.
Well, I don't know about that.
No, it's good to have a few gray hairs. You should do.
How about white hairs?
Fine. That's perfect. I remember this guy that was running locally. He was like in his 80s, and his opponent was a very young guy. He was like late 20s, and he. I don't think he won, but he had a great time, and he made a lot. And they had funny jokes about the age difference, and I mean, it's fine. I say go for it.
Hey, maybe I'll think about it.
Okay. Well, we'll have to check in. Until then, think about it. I'll check in with you next week to see what your thoughts are. I'm serious. Go for it. And I urge other people, this is how we're going to take back the republic. This is where the power is.
Well,
and
you're
so
making
at the
a good
state
point.
legislative level. And by the way, Republicans have taken back at least 2 state houses.
I mean, the overall
New Hampshire.
point that you're making is that people have to stop complaining about it and trying to do something about it.
Exactly. It's a civic duty. It really is. We can have a purpose. As Americans, we think that, freedom grows on trees and that everything is fine. It doesn't. You have to exercise the levers of freedom. You have to get involved and, otherwise they atrophy. You have to go out and actually use the apparatus that's there. Otherwise, it's going to get very rusty. Anyways, Mike Shaw, what are you working on? What do you have up in terms of an article?
All right. You're going to love this. A survey just came out. I'm going to be writing about it. Attitudes toward the vaccine.
Okay.
Spoiler, 47% of the people do not want to take the vaccine. 47%.
That's very high.
And a lot of reasons why. Even 33% of those of us over 55. No, there's been, frankly, a few too many side effects that they've been kind of blowing off. And it's a troubled introduction. As I told my wife, the thing that bothered me the most was, because I was on this during the early stages, they were talking about 3 boosters, giving it in 4 stages. Then they realized the logistics of that are going to be tough. So then they brought it to 2. And I think what's happening is the dose is too strong.
Okay.
And that's why people are getting these reactions. And there are some people dying from this thing.
No, that's true.
And we'll see. But it's amazing I've never seen a vaccine with this kind of public rejection before. So somebody did a very detailed study. I was able to get a hold of it. They just posted it today, and I think they surveyed like 6,000.
Where did this poll take place, by the way, Mike?
It's do I still have it up here? Let's see. You know what? I took it off my main browser to clear the way, but they it's a nationally recognized outfit.
Okay.
That they went into the ethnic side of it, all kinds of demographics.
Yep.
And it is interesting.
No, we'll have to keep an eye on it. I mean, it's all being rolled out. I know that certainly the media is touting it as being this great thing, and they keep showing constantly people getting the shot. That's like every day we see it. Yeah. So, it's which makes you suspicious, quite honestly. But anyway, all right, Michael Schultz.
Right, so
I want to thank you.
Next time we will
continue to see where we are.
Do it again.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Talk to you soon.